Good morning. This is Ludica Pekina with GAI Insights, where we rate news, AI news, essential, important, and optional every day, working days, uh, not weekends. So today I have a founder crew, John, Paul, and Tim, and Ankaj, to actually go through the articles. We have 6 articles. Some of them are very thought-provoking, some announcements. And the articles are posted on the website, gaiinsights.com/articles. So comment, please give us your opinion. We would appreciate it very much. All right, let's go with the first article, Ankash, please.
Thanks, Luda. So the first one that we have for today comes from Google DeepMind, and it talks about their VO2, their state-of-the-art video generation model.
I can't get to that screen to show it. If somebody can, please. Yeah, good. Thank you. Yes, Tim, what do you think about it? This is a cool model.
Yep. But first, I'd like to say I think Ankaj and I should go by pseudonyms George and Ringo today, and then we would be John, Paul, George, and Ringo. For those who don't know, if there are any, that's the Beatles. Anyway, and we're about that age, so we like the Beatles probably. Okay, so VO, which is the second version of the video generation model from Google, I would rate this important. I could say, again in John's term that has stuck with me, this is just another everyday miracle because this thing is unbelievable. It's not perfect. They still have some ways to go, and there's still short video segments, but this one's longer. It generates 10 seconds, I think, or 15-second videos. Longer videos, high quality, better adherence to the prompt, better physics, better everything. So these things just keep getting better. And, we are a visual species. So this is going to have impact, I think, beyond just people making videos in Hollywood kind of stuff. It's just such a powerful rendition. It's still probably a little short of that, but this is at one level, Google keeping up with the Joneses in the sense that Sora and other models out there are already close to this good, if not this good, but this is right in there with them. And because it's Google, I think it deserves at least an important ranking.
Okay, yeah. So proposal for important, John, Paul?
I'm good with important. Tim, to your point, I think what a lot of people, it's miraculous enough that we get this visual activity. The thing is that I think what's really interesting is this whole notion of creating other representations of reality in real time that work visually and physically and so forth. Because as we've discussed before, as these representations grow, they're isomorphisms of different ways of describing reality, and then they start to interact.
Yep.
And so, when you have a mathematical description, so to be less abstract, I wouldn't be surprised if something like Sora begins to get used in robots as a way to describe the environment, a novel environment that they're then interpreting. You know what I mean? And
yeah, absolutely. Representation, as you said, and I certainly strongly believe, representation is thinking at one level.
Yeah.
And what this opens up is all sorts of different potential representations. Again, this is, where our dear friend Alan Kay would say, it would be good if we tried to speed up the 6 or 7 decades it usually takes to figure out what to do, because we're just groping around with this stuff. We have no idea really even how to create these new representations, but this makes it possible and definitely could transform things. The right representation makes all the difference. Just ask Newton.
Yeah, so I was actually optional on this one. I can support important. There's so much activity in this space, and it's Google, and it's across their platform, so it can be used much easier than others. So it is it stands out in that sense. So I can support important. Paul, what do you think? But it's really so much activity. It's a everyday miracle. That's why optional. But in my mind, Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's another indication that Google's finally getting its sea legs there, and I think we're finally seeing that whatever kind of cloud platform, Microsoft, Google, AWS, they're all getting credible basics of text to text, text to video, and this is another indication of it. And I think they're all getting their kind of quote, Office 360 equivalent on this. We continue. I continue to see the 4 or 5 companies I've been with the last week or so. I mean, they're swimming in use cases and they can't keep up with all these technologies. So they need one kind of vendor that's got more and more of these capabilities. And if you're a Google shop, you don't have to go to Sora Midjourney to get your text to video.
Yeah, that's
important
very,
time.
and Ashish is commenting that Sora is underwhelming. When when it was announced, it was overwhelming, and they waited and missed a spot, I think, to take the lead. Okay, so let's mark it important and proceed.
Well, and I also think,
Okay.
just a footnote, I think we're also moving from being blown away by the capability to start to get more veracity. If you remember, even a year and a half ago, like, oh my God, summarize a meeting. That was amazing. And then you looked at it and said, that's not that good a summary. And the same thing in the video here.
Right, and we will have another article that actually lists the video models, and we can scroll and see how many are out there. This is unbelievably crowded space. But anyway, for Google, it's important. Let's proceed.
Okay, the next one that we have is from New York Times and talks about how Claude has become Tech Insider's chatbot of choice.
Yeah. Paul, what do you think about this emotional, assistant, legal, talking to you in a much more embracing way? What do you think?
Well, I mean, the skeptic in me says, let's acknowledge it. Anthropic and Claude are spending millions buying billboards at every single airport that I'm in, and that New York Times articles may not always be 100% optimistic. I do think anecdotally, though, we have seen this in our learning lab last night. We have one of the founders at Atomic Works, and he was saying Claudia, his go-to things. I'm seeing a lot of traction in Claudia, and that's my wife's name's Claudia, in Claude. But I had this as optional.
Yeah,
I'm
but
not sure what
why
the AI
is it?
leader would do with this.
Actually, I was going to go for important, and I think that what I like about it, and this also goes to our friend and client Inflection, and Ted Shelton over there, this notion of having an emotional tone to the robot. I use Pi a lot. That's Inflection's retail product, and I do think, and this also I think links to the Ethan Mollick article coming up, the anthropomorphization of these models, I think, is actually going to be a big part of adoption. And unlike previous technologies, I mean, my family has a tradition of like naming cars and stuff like that. So my son's car is Betsy, and but other than kind of that thin veneer, usual of giving it a personality or a name, I don't think we've had this kind of interaction with our devices before. This, to me, is going to be deeply where this, I believe, where this is going to cut into society, into individual use, is going to be in this notion of having a quote unquote relationship, emotional and tone and things like that with these models. And that's just as social media rode on the wave of connection and pictures and so forth. I actually think tone and emotion and relationship is going to be the drug delivery mechanism for AI.
I think you have a point here, even though it can be dangerous. As we know, character AI has been taken to court for teenagers using it and believing it wholeheartedly and acting on the advice that was not very good. So it's somewhat dangerous. But I agree. It's a good point. Tim, what do you think?
John and I are peas in a pod here. I agree. I think the emotional tone of these models is extremely important. It's especially to adoption. You know, as Danny Kahneman, who I think we both like a lot, who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow and a bunch of other things, said, you know, we really think we make our decisions oftentimes with our slow thinking, rational mind, but in fact, we're pretty much always emotional at first blush. And so getting the emotion right is super critical. It's just absolutely critical. And a lot of people get turned off by OpenAI as an example, because it's too, what's the right, I don't know what the phrase, but it's kind of milk toasty is the word I would use. It's trying to be nice to everybody. It's a little too sycophantic, as they said here in the article. So it's difficult, and we're going to anthropomorphize these things by nature. It's impossible not to, even if we tell ourselves they're not human, they're not thinking like humans. But you do anyway, and that can make a huge difference in adoption. If your employees just get turned off and they think, oh, this seems too generic or just telling me what I want to hear, and it's not, I don't trust it as much. That's a huge issue. In fact, I think this is an enormous issue with AI systems in general. So let me take the extreme case where, since we love the term co-pilot, imagine you have an AI co-pilot and you're in a fighter pilot situation, and you're trying to figure out if your AI is reading the Sunday Times or paying attention to the missiles being fired at you. That's really important, and you don't have time to type in a lot of prompts. You need emotional, quick judgment, which is possible when you have a human being, even if they're only talking to you, but especially if you can see them. So that ability to see inside the AI emotionally and say, where is it right now? What's it really thinking, quote unquote, thinking about? We have to use these terms because we don't have any better terms. I think it's going to become absolutely essential. So this is one small piece of that, but that's just a huge issue for the decade. And it's a decade-long, 20-year-long issue, but it's a huge issue.
Yeah. Okay, Paul, going important on this one. Okay.
Yeah, and I would just other footnote. I mean, I do find Claude, it says my name. It'll say, Paul, I'm happy to do that. And it's a little bit like a colleague that says your name. And I could see it morphing and also, you know, putting some humor in now and then. Jesus, John, you've asked this 5 different times. You know, you can turn up the John Svioklis snark meter in these ones. So I do think it's.
So,
I think it's your Teutonic background that puts you off on this there, Paul.
Okay.
So another question, an interesting question. The article stresses that it's mostly folks that work for AI software companies, right, in California. So they're taking the lead in this one. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, they're the most emotionally, you know, bereft people. No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
Hey, quit talking about my people that way.
Hey, I'm just telling you, you know.
Okay, important it is. Let's go on.
Remember, I was a senior executive at a tech, you know, a tech strategy company. Talk about people who chose not to deal with people. Anyway.
Bereft people. Okay, let's go. Third article, please.
Okay, the next one comes from Wired, and it talks about how AI will evolve into an organization strategy for all.
Yes, a not very long article, but talks about how organizations would change from the dictatorial structures to something very different using AI. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a good short article by our friend Ethan. You know, for a guy who, and let me just do a snark here, for a guy who teaches in business school, it's kind of organizationally naive, but most business schools don't teach about organization anymore. So, you know, or, you know, at least at Wharton, maybe they don't. They teach more about markets. Yeah, I mean, totally. You know, Ben Kaczynski and I wrote a paper in the 90s that talked about what we call cognitive reapportionment. How do you design organizations when machines can think? And, you know, totally. And I think that's exactly the right way to think about it. You know, I was talking to one of our research sites, and, that this person was making the case for that the proper way to introduce AI in organizations through the HR department, and that these models are they anthropomorphize them and basically say they're digital employees, and you hire the digital employee for the task, and their resume is what they've been what they've been trained on, and so I think, yeah, this is the central, from a management standpoint, this is the central theoretical and practical issue that's going to evolve in 25 and 26, which is, how do I organize when I have this kind of capability, and what are my economics given that organization?
Yeah, I agree with the premise of the article that it will certainly change. Having been a GE and having run large organizations within large companies, I'm very skeptical on the proposed time frame. It took Jack Welch a decade to rewire GE to take the layers out. He
Sure.
didn't want more than 3 layers, and this was difficult to achieve. It took him a long, long time. So the premise is right. It certainly will be embraced by the new companies, and it's easier, right? But large organizations will require quite significant leadership at the top and across the whole C-suite to actually do it. I don't know whether you guys agree with me, but I'm strongly believe.
I think it'll take strong leadership in a while. I happen to think Jack Welch sits in the same category as Ginny Rometty. I think he took a great company and ruined it, but that's another whole conversation. But
Oh, John.
no, anyway.
I agree.
But yes, the notion that Luda, I'm optimistic that this is going to happen a little faster, because the labor substitution economics are much bigger than when he was doing spans control.
Correct.
And in addition, this is something, the taxonomy that Paul introduced of individual productivity in the product, or organizational capability, in terms of where you can get value. Because it's going across all 3 of those. What Jack did had all to do with just squishing down the organization and optimizing around market leadership. And and what I mean by that is, if you have a product, if you have an information product now, or in GE's case, you got physical products, like a turbine, and that turbine can't explain itself to you, that's going to be a competitive problem for them. And that, I think, is going to drive it into the organization faster, because it's going to be in the task, it's going to be in the organization, and it's going to be in the product or service.
Yeah, no, totally a different structure. But remember, Jack went horizontally. We did the process re-engineering across everything, and then the vertical. So it went like both ways. And yes, but here you're right. It's a different technology. It's faster, and also the pressure of the potential results on the labor economics is much stronger. So I agree, it's different, but it would take some time. I think it's not an obvious.
But we are seeing examples. I mean, the Klarna article flown around where they've stopped hiring a year ago, and they've taken 700 people out of customer service. I think is going to keep driving it. And the other thing I thought was easy on email, Toby Redshaw is one of our advisors. He was CIO at FedEx. In terms of inspirational leaders, he was talking about how flat the organization was. And when he got promoted from director to VP, it came with an office, with a conference room, a full-time admin, a full-time BA, and a full-time thing. So they were using humans and not robots to get massive productivity out of their key leaders here. And
yeah. So this is an interesting. So we're putting it important or essential. What do you guys think?
Important.
Yeah. And another shout out to Ethan, and he continues to write really insightful things. It's making a major contribution to the industry.
Yeah, I know. I'll go with important, because I do think it's important. I thought this was a little light on substance, but I would actually agree a little bit with Luda that these things seem like they're. I can make both sides of the argument. Things that were obvious, like servant leadership 30 years ago, still aren't implemented a lot.
Yeah.
And, loyalty marketing, which was invented 30 plus years ago, still doesn't find its way into a lot of marketing shops. despite the overwhelming evidence of their effectiveness. So,
Look, I know we have to pick up the pace, but Tim wrote a book with Chunka Moy and with Paul Carroll, and Chunka wrote a book a long time ago with Larry Downs called Unleashing Killer App, and a lot of it was about what technology does to organizations, especially from a coding standpoint. If you look at Ronald Coase's work, so I think
right.
I agree. This is a very, very light article saying stuff that to those of us that have been in the soup for a while are completely obvious, but whatever.
But it is thought provoking.
Yeah, it's a good article, and I'm okay with important.
Important.
We forget that organizations often, the problems are the people, not the problems. And it takes people a long time.
Well said.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, important it is, but thought-provoking. Okay, let's go next. Please, Ankash.
We're not hearing you, Ankash.
Ankash, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute. So the next article comes from Stanford and Meta. It talks about Apollo, which is a tool for exploration of video understanding in large multimodal models.
Yes, Tim, you got all the videos today. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is interesting. Again, it's a research paper, small model. But again, this, back to my dog catches car moment here, that we're still just discovering the basics. So this is another research effort that appears to show you can make enormous progress in your ability to scale video understanding without nearly as much compute power and other things. But again, it's a research paper. It's only done on smaller models. It comes out very well as state of the art against the smaller models. So it will be interesting to see where it goes and whether these principles, hold for larger models and for more video activity. But the results are pretty spectacular for what they did. Yeah. So I would say optional for the AI leader. If you're in video production or in generating video models, this is essential to keep abreast of this stuff. But I think for the general AI leader, this is optional. It's early, and it's a research paper. But another important indicator of how much we have to learn at this early stage.
Yeah. Anka, you can scroll down to the results table. Remember, for the first article, we talked about how many of the models go lower. Yeah, and just scroll through the results. Just see go. So these are all the rows are models, guys. So it goes go. So it is a very long table, and it just tells you how many folks are actually at it. Proposed optional. John, Paul, how are you?
Ankash, I think you've got some strong feelings on this one from some of the chat info. You want to make the case for a higher rating?
Yes, John. John, to Tim's point, so I have been seeing examples of people already using this to analyze videos. So a few examples on Twitter are there, and it really works well. So there have been examples where people have fed it 30-minute videos, 20-minute videos, and it has been able to analyze those in matter of a minute or so. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think this notion of being able to project from smaller models, into larger models, that's really cool. I don't know, I'm going to give it an important, because of that. I understand it's a crowded space, but this seems like a real step forward in terms of scalability. And anyway, that's where I was. I know we're running short on time. I know.
Yeah, Paul, what do you think?
Optional.
Yeah, optional. I think optional. Yeah,
for the AI leader. Yeah.
Yeah,
there's just so few use cases. 99% of it right now, they're dealing with text to text.
Yeah, I think optional. Optional, guys.
Okay.
Power the chalk. Let's go on, Ankash.
Okay. The next one is a use case where the article discusses how Depop's AI image recognition tool speeds up selling for their 180,000 daily listings.
Yeah, it's not speeds up. What I understood from the article, so it's a Depop is the company that presents the merchandise to be resold, and it was difficult to actually put those advertisement in place. And what they did is took the videos, and from videos generated the whole listing, and it was engaging, and it gave them new 180 postings a day. So this is
180,000. Yeah.
180,000, yeah, new listings a day, and that's incredible. So, and they don't talk about the revenue, but I'm sure the revenue has increased as well. So it's amazing. But I think it's a tremendous use case. I was between optional and important, but there's little detail, so I put it as optional. What do you guys think?
Yeah, again, in the everyday miracle category, it's amazing. I mean, this is a thrift shop, right? This is,
Yeah.
Craigslist on steroids. But the ability to use generative AI, because since you're doing that and you're a broker, you have very little room for margin here, is my guess. So, you're just trying to get volume, and you got to keep costs under control. So
Yeah.
the ability to have simpler mechanisms so you get more volume because it's easier for people to put stuff up for sale, and you get more accuracy, presumably. That's the question, right? And they don't have much data. So the optional part is this is an early release, so they don't really have much analysis on how well it's working and whether the savings in effort to get items onto their shelves, their virtual shelves, is actually increasing sales and margin. But classic issue of where low margin companies especially are going to benefit from this stuff.
Yeah.
Again, labor substitution.
So you're thinking important, huh, Tim?
I'm in between because again, there's no feedback on the results since it's just brand new, but it's an interesting use case. Yeah. So
Yeah, very interesting.
I could go.
Paul, John?
I could go either way. Optional or important. I'm leaning optional just because it's kind of light.
Yeah.
Paul, you like use cases. What do you think?
Yeah, but optional. It's not
Optional.
enough specifics.
Optional. Let's go to the last article. We are rushing here. Sorry.
Okay, the last one talks about scaling test type compute with open models.
Yeah.
Algorithmic improvements. John.
Yeah, I was going to give this an important, essential for anybody working on your, the more technical folks. But the general trend of the emphasis on inference, not training, I think is huge. I think that these different algorithms of, the notion of, compute optimal scaling, diverse verifier tree search and search and learn, and their strategies of how they go through from, best of n or best of different options, beam search and diverse verifier tree search, which is kind of a hybrid of both. At a conceptual level, I mean, it's just generating more options and having better ways of evaluating those options, and then being able to go back and to, create new insights. As we've talked about for some time, I think that this compound model, inference-led improvement, certainly in 2025, is going to be, where a lot of the action is. And I think this is very well put together. And, their ability for these smaller models to outperform the larger models. You can see here, 3B model, outperforming the 7B model with just a number of generations of the problem. Yeah. So I think, compute allows us to do brute force things with small improvements in algorithms so you can create spectacular results.
Yeah. So the whole premise of this is that O1 from OpenAI is not open source, obviously, right? But it gave us quite a bit of power. And the Hugging Face went after trying to figure out what actually happened and how can you do that through a different methodology, test time, compute, scaling, right? And that's what they focused on. And they are providing different ways of going at it technically. And that's really a good article. So I can back important. I was thinking optional, but yeah. Okay, Paul, Tim?
Yeah, I can go with important. I mean, it's, I have a feeling of like what's old again is new. What's new again is old, whatever it is, because what they're really doing here, these people should go back and read the original AI work from the 60s and 70s, because this is really very, very similar to the heuristic algorithms that were built into the original AI systems. basically, even with machine learning, you still have a space that's much larger than you have the compute to actually exhaustively search. So you have to have theories about how you wade into this space and find good markers. And also this goes back to we're still at the very early stages, because these modest improvements in heuristic algorithms are making fantastic improvements in the outcomes. So big improvements. So I think it's a good idea, and I think this one seems to have worked pretty well. So I think
Ashish agrees. Inference is where it's at.
Yeah.
The other thing is that these training methods with human feedback, that's just a fancy way of doing knowledge engineering. So anyway, a lot of that stuff that was true then is the same.
All right, let's put it important. We're running a little bit over time. So Ankash, if you could put the card up. So we have
Yes, Luda, it's up.
We have 4 importance and 2 optionals for today. Great day, great Tuesday. Thanks for joining us, Tim, and wonderful discussion. We obviously can take much more time to get through some of those ideas. Thank you very much. Thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow.